Thank you. Hey everyone. Yeah, I'm Mady and I'm the head of evangelism at Rasa. I come from a product and engineering background. So, right after college, I worked for a think tank where I worked on probabilistic statistical modeling, back when machine learning wasn't as cool as it is today, right? So it was great. I learned a lot, but I definitely wasn't as smart as some of my friends and colleagues. So I left the think tank and joined a startup where I was building systems and applying NLP in the real world. Since then, I've worked with several startups and enterprises building machine learning driven products, specifically conversational AI strategies and applications for companies that were looking to automate and streamline business processes or really elevate customer experience. So today I want to talk about something that I feel passionately about, and that's superior customer experience for the enterprise. We'll talk about how to build conversational AI for customer experience, touch upon Rasa's open source NLU and machine learning powered dialogue management, and also just focus on best practices that lead to successful adoption and high impact. Cool. So let me tell you a little bit about a trip that I took, a few weeks ago. So I flew to Denver to visit some friends. We went on hikes, went to good restaurants. It was great, right? So at the end of 5 days, which is how long my trip lasted, I fly back. So I arrive back home, but my bag does not. So I go to the airline office in the airport, and they say that my bag is probably still in Denver. They took down all of my information, the bag tag number, all of that, and said that they would be in touch the next day. So I wait all day, and they don't really call me. So I go online and I try to look for a number to call. I spent about 20 minutes or so trying to figure out the right number. I call them, and they said that my bag was probably going to arrive the next day. Fine. So I call back the next day, same thing. No bag. And I call back on day 3, and they tell me that my bag is actually in LA, even though I took a direct flight. Day 5, my bag gets delivered to me, right? Finally. And I spent so much time trying to figure out the right number, then got put on hold each day, got routed to different departments because my bag wasn't lost and found, it was delayed. So I couldn't talk to lost and found and had to go through this entire ordeal of just getting my bag back, right? So it's definitely not an ideal customer experience. And the problem is that my problem isn't unique. Customer service today is a maze. Customers are inundated with so many interfaces, a 1-800 number, an FAQ page, email, mobile app, IVR systems, and it's just a lot, and it leaves customers confused, disoriented, and then just disengaged with the entire process. And the burden is placed on the customer to figure out which interface to engage with, which number to call. And the burden is also on the customer to figure out the language of the company as well. I didn't know which department or option to pick. Was it lost and found? Was it misplaced? And that burden shouldn't be placed on me or on you. And it's also challenging for these companies that have to maintain or scale this type of service. A misrouted call is 3 times more expensive than a call that doesn't get answered. Now think about that. A misrouted call is more expensive. And scaling different departments, 10 different departments to service 10 different types of customer needs is not scalable either. And so customers should just be able to go to the website, a chat widget pops up, and then in their own words, they should be able to say, hey, where's my bag? Or, I lost my credit card, or I want to transfer some money to my friend. And it's on the AI assistant to figure out how to help them. Because great customer experiences speak the customer's language. And we really have to be able to abstract away all of the complexity involved in, of the organization, of these processes, and provide a single interface that customers can interact with. And so that's what conversational customer experience means. It means that we're automating these manual processes and allowing employees to, focus on higher value tasks. It means that we're elevating customer experience. Always on service and support means that you get your questions answered right away, or if the assistant's not able to answer it, then it can escalate to a human that can help. And in doing so, we're laying the foundation for digital transformation. because tech-enhanced services make it easy to see expansion opportunities and scale across, multiple business units and across the enterprise. So think of this as, a personal concierge service for your customer, so they can express in their own terms, in their own words, what they need to get stuff done. For those of you that want to know a little bit about Rasa, Rasa is an open source conversational AI platform. So if you're a team or a company that's looking to build AI systems, probably use a platform like Rasa to make that happen, right? Rasa open source provides the infrastructure foundation that's used by hundreds of organizations and core developer workflows that's used by millions of makers. And Rasa Enterprise adds the sort of multidisciplinary team workflows and robust tooling to work at global scale. So now I want to talk a little bit about the open source platform and how, when you're thinking of delivering scalable automated experience, some of the best practices that you should try to practice or think of when you're trying to deliver these applications. At the foundation, an AI assistant needs to be able to do two things. It needs to understand what you're saying, meaning it has to identify the intent, extract entities, and then it needs to respond to what you're saying. So if you're asking for it to do something, it needs to perform tasks on your behalf. So it needs both natural language understanding and dialogue management. And Rasa uses machine learning to do both NLU and dialogue management. For NLU, we have DIET, or Dual Intent and Entity Transformer. It's an open source, state-of-the-art neural network architecture for NLU. It's one model that does both intent recognition and entity extraction together. It can use any pre-trained language model in a plug-and-play fashion. So you can use various pre-trained embeddings like BERT, GLOVE, Convert, and so on, and then plug that into DIET. And so let's take a look at some of the results that we found with DIET. The first thing we found is that even with just sparse features and no pre-training, DIET outperforms the previous state of the art. Another super exciting result that we found is that DIET outperforms fine-tuning the whole BERT model itself. It came out a few years ago and took the world by storm. And fine-tuning large-scale pre-trained models can be computationally intensive. And that's something that's not accessible to individual teams or developers that just want to play around with these. So in that way, DIET is lightweight, and it's also 6 times faster to train than BERT. Feel free to check out the academic paper online. I think we linked to it in one of the talks. In one of the slides. So that being said, even though DIET does intent recognition, we maintain that intents are still not a great way to scale. So best practice 1, try to think of intents like rules. They're great to help you get started, but they're not going to help you scale. And that's because intents greatly simplify the world, right? Humans can understand sentences that they haven't seen or heard before. So, read the sentence on my screen. It says, Iceland's president admits he went too far with threat to ban pineapple pizza. And you know what that means, right? You know what it means. You kind of understand the sentence, even though you haven't seen it before. When I was telling you about what happened with my bag in Denver, you understood what I was saying, even though you probably haven't met me or heard that story before. And so AI assistants aren't like that, right? Of course. And so we have intents, and what they do is they simplify language understanding from text into a few categories. And not everything fits neatly into a category. Intents are a limited way of understanding, because what if you said something like, I'm looking for a restaurant, the assistant says, how about Chinese food? And then you say, I had that yesterday. I had that yesterday. What intent does that fall under? Not really any particular, it's not a no intent. It's not a yes intent either. But in that context, you're saying, no, I don't want, Chinese food. I had that yesterday. I want something else. NLU models typically take a message and predict the intent that it belongs to. But, end-to-end learning, which is another open source feature that we released, is a way to get rid of intents. It takes a message and its context, and then it predicts the next action. And so it's a dramatically different approach from conversational AI so far, because it gives us the ability to move beyond intent. So that's not to say that intents are going away if you use Rasa open source, but a best practice to follow, right, is use them sparingly, like they're helpful to get you started, but try to plan to move away from intense because like rules, they can be hard to scale and maintain. They're not going to satisfy all of the edge cases that you will definitely encounter when you build conversational systems. And so that's NLU. The second part of what you need when you're building conversational systems is dialogue management. And one of the main problems with conversational AI is that it's hard to predict that all of the things users say to chatbots. You've probably experienced this yourself when you've talked to a chatbot, you've said something and the chatbot doesn't really understand, the breakdown, or it says, sorry, can you say that again? Right? And so how do you handle that type of complexity typically? You do that with data and training. But it's also, a best practice to kind of think of how you can use machine learning to handle this. Or specifically, we've been using transformers. And our dialogue policy is called the Transformer Embedding Dialogue Policy. It has a predefined architecture, uses attention, specifically self-attention, as opposed to recurrent neural networks, to handle sub-dialogues and to handle unexpected user behavior. So the model, on a high level, learns which conversation turns to pay attention to and which ones to ignore. Typically, attention models for dialogue will ignore things like chit-chat, they'll ignore user correction, user digression, nudge the user back onto a happy path, and pay attention when the user starts cooperating again, with the goal at hand. What TED does is that it goes back to the conversation history at each step, and it looks at which parts are relevant and which parts to ignore in order to make the next prediction. And because it does this, it's much more equipped to handle unexpected user behavior, and it can do so with less training data than you typically need for recurrent neural networks. So attention-based dialogue models might be something that you want to look into. All AI projects start typically at this stage, right, where the gap or delta between conversations and us is just too huge. And then a lot of projects actually never leave this stage and that's what you hear when you're speaking with customers or with development teams, is that, hey, we weren't able to scale, right? And there's many phases of scale. Some don't leave this stage because, we don't have enough training data, or we don't have a proper way to make changes, to make iterative improvements to our system. So let's talk a little bit about what that means and what that looks like. In addition to handling unexpected conversations learning, we have to be able to do this with data. And this is platform and tech agnostic. It's another best practice that you might want to follow regardless of the framework that you use. And so listen to user insights, right? And use that data to continually improve and evolve your AI assistant. One of the best things about conversational AI is that users are literally telling you in their own words what they want and how they're phrasing certain things. They're also telling you what features they want to use. So if you've launched a banking assistant and you find that a lot of users are asking, in addition to asking just FAQs, they're also saying things like, hey, can you transfer money to a friend? Is that something that you can do? Then maybe that's a skill that you can add to your assistant and integrate with some kind of backend system so you can transfer money on the user's. So continually monitor what users are saying based on security and privacy regulations, of course. If your assistant has to be GDPR compliant, then there's ways to anonymize this data and secure data at rest and at motion, to follow security and governance best practices and continue to use insights to evolve and improve your assistant. We like to call this process conversation-driven development. Similar to test-driven or behavior-driven development, CDD is a process for conversational AI development. It's made of 6 steps that you can start following today. So first is start by sharing your assistant with people as soon as possible. Don't wait for your assistant to be perfect. It probably won't be perfect, especially early on. It will fail, and that's okay. So share it with test users, with beta users as soon as possible. And when you do, the next step is to start reviewing these conversations as they come in. So maybe set up a ritual around this where you can review conversations every week or every other day and make that a core part of your implementation lifecycle. Well, I think I got a message here. Please move on to Q&A when ready. All right, cool. I think we should start to wrap this up soon, but yeah, thanks for the reminder. So yeah, I mean, the next step, once you start reviewing those conversations, is to annotate the data as you review it. So you might want to tag certain intents or entities, tag synonyms and things like that. And this is a process that typically data engineers or data scientists can follow, but if your platform supports low code and no code assistance, that's something that conversation designers can do as well. Then test with this data, right? So run your integration and functional tests. Just like you don't ship any application to production without thorough testing, follow the same process for AI assistants. And then track how your assistant is doing once you've tested. Track against certain metrics that you've outlined from the get-go, things like F1 score, accuracy, etc., or even like track proxy measures. Like maybe a user not clicking on a certain button. What does that tell you? Does that mean something? Maybe users not reaching back out for support. And then of course, fix things based on your results, and then start this process of sharing, reviewing, annotating. Start this CDD process back up again. And I want to end with saying, conversational AI won't work in a vacuum. It's not something that only data scientists, data engineers, and developers can do. It's important to integrate team members with different roles and skill sets into a systematic and measurable AI development process. Conversational AI has definitely evolved from innovation projects that were led by research teams into a set of mission critical enterprise applications. Research has shown, we've done studies as well that have shown that more and more enterprises are deploying chatbots today. So building great conversational AI requires a mix of skills. It requires subject matter experts because you need a deep understanding of the user and the domain. You need application developers, software skills that you need to build integrations. And you also need the data science skills to optimize. That allows for multidisciplinary teams to design, build, improve, and maintain applications. Your platform should really be able to address the many phases of scale. As you've picked a platform, think about accelerating time to value and not time to market. What does that mean? It means that you're not just looking at endless features that you want to, add to your bot or integrate with. Maybe you don't need something like sentiment analysis early on. What you really need is to process your data and to focus on some high value, features and things that your users look for. Try to, achieve production success at scale. And one of the ways you do that is to reach customers where they are, engage them with multi-channel experiences, try to use a high performance architecture that can scale up and down, scale up to meet demand, scale up to meet traffic, and leverage reusable, infrastructure and follow software best practices. And you also want to measure and deliver some of this customer success at scale. And that means using analytics and following something like CDD. So with that, I want to say great customer experiences speak the customer's language on every channel, and they have to be powered by a platform that will support the many phases of enterprise scale. With these fundamentals and best practices in mind, I'm sure that we can learn from each other and build compelling experiences together. With that, I want to wrap it up. Thank you for sticking around. We either have time for questions or maybe we should hop to the roundtable discussion. I'll let Sharon handle that. And if you want to get in touch with me, there's my Twitter handle. You can also follow me, find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to answer any questions or chat about CDD or conversational AI in general. Thank you.